All right. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Orkin Bajcik, and today we are going to talk about productivity and productivity measures. So to define productivity, simply we can say that it's the ratio of output to inputs. We may have a single input, or we may have a set of inputs in this analysis, or we may have uh, maybe a specific type of outputs, or we may have all of the outputs. The reason why we analyze productivity is to understand how we perform. So this is related to what you are seeing on the screen, that it is used for comparison. It could be that you are comparing maybe two machines or two employees or two processes, or it could be that we are comparing our productivity between different time periods. So maybe in the first quarter of the year to the second quarter of the year. So that way we can see how we are performing. And we will talk about three types of productivity measures. And the first one is called the partial productivity measure. In this one, we have, remember that ratio of outputs to inputs. In this case, we have a single input only. So in the denominator here, we only have a single type of input. In multi-factor productivity measure, we have a set of inputs here. So I use the word subset or set, we can say in this case, but what I'm trying to really say is we are not going to include all of the inputs. It has to be a set of inputs. And then we can talk about multi-factor. So for example, in partial productivity, we may be just focusing on machine as our input, machine hours. And in the multi-factor, we can talk about labor hours and machine hours. And in total factor measure of productivity, we are looking at the ratio of all output to all input. So everything that's involved is included. Now, let's look at a numerical example and better understand what these mean. So I have a table on the left which summarizes the outputs produced. So we have 100 units produced, and we have 20 units that are in process. So these are getting ready. And the input used in terms of dollars spent is also summarized. So for labor, we spent $500. For materials, we spent $100. Energy costs us $300, and the other expenses sum up to $150. So I have a few questions here that will help us calculate these three types of productivity measures. So the first one that we are going to analyze is the total productivity or total factor productivity. So to be able to calculate this, if you remember our formula, right, output to input. Since we are looking at the total factor productivity, I need to calculate the total output and the total input, right? So the total amount of outputs we have is the sum of 120, right? So I'm going to highlight these. So I did 100 plus 20, and that is the total amount of output we have. And the total amount of input is going to be, again, the sum of the inputs we have, and I'm going to highlight them as well. So what we did is 500 plus 100 plus 300 plus 150, that equals 1050. So to get the total productivity measure, all I need to do is to divide 120 by 1050, because again, remember the formula is the total, the output divided by the input. So this leads us to 0.11 approximately, and we will say units per dollar spent. You may see cases where instead of dollars, we are analyzing in terms of hours. That is perfectly fine. So if that were the case, you could say, for example, units per hour, or you might be looking at inputs in terms of minutes, then you would say units per minute. That will just depend on the scenario that you are working on. Okay, so this is the total productivity measure. Maybe I'll choose a lighter color for that. All right. So the second question is a multi-factor productivity in which the input is the total amount spent on labor and materials, and the output is the total output. Okay. So the total output is already on our worksheet, right? It is 120. Now, for the input, the question is asking us to use the amount spent on labor and materials. All I need to do is to sum the amount spent on these two inputs or two types of input, and then that will be 500 plus 100, which I represent by B9 plus B10 here. And the result of this calculation will lead to the multi-factor productivity that is asked from us. And we will say 0.2 units per dollar spent. And I will highlight this as well. Okay, again, the formula is on the screen. So we did 120 divided by 500 plus 100. Part C is a similar question, but the difference is here the output is the amount produced. The input is still the amount spent on labor and materials. So the only difference is that instead of using 120, we will use 100, and we will divide that value by the same calculation follows 500 plus 100. So it will be essentially 100 divided by 600, as you see. So that will be 0.17 approximately units per dollar spent on labor and materials. Okay. So let's look at part D. It says the partial productivity, right? So partial productivity focuses only on a single input. And the input is the total amount spent on energy. And the output is the total amount of output we have. So, okay, I will look at the total output amount, which is 120, and we will divide it by the amount spent on energy, which is $300, right? So this will give us the partial productivity in which the input is the amount spent on energy and the output is the total output. And therefore, we have 0.4 units per dollar spent. So we are producing 0.4 units of this product for each dollar we spend on energy. Okay, so that is how we would read it. And if for example, if you look at part A, we can say that for each dollar spent on all of our inputs, we are producing 0.11 units. And let's look at the last question here, which is another partial productivity question, but the output is the amount produced in this case, and the input is the amount spent on labor. So I am going to select the amount produced, and we will divide it by the amount spent on labor, and that will be 100 divided by 500. And we will say that for each dollar spent on labor, we are producing 0.2 units of this product. Okay. So again, this is a summary of productivity and productivity measures. In general, you can say outputs divided by the inputs. There are three different types of productivity measures: partial, multi-factor, and total factor productivity measures. And this video summarizes and illustrates how to calculate these measures. So I hope that this video will be helpful to you, and I will see you in the next video.